Hi all, welcome back to another video. Today I have this Craftsman leaf blower here. I got this one from somebody and non-running. Well, I can't say that. What I am going to say though is it won't run now because there's no way to start it. The pull rope is all gone. So I really don't know if it runs. But what I am going to do is I'm going to have to fix the pull rope to find out. And really we're going to have to take our next steps after we do that. So what are we going to do? What we're going to do is we're going to figure out how in the world to get to that pull start. Now on these blowers it's almost always next to impossible. You almost always have to take the engine out of the blower. So I guess I'm just going to start taking stuff apart. I'll let you know when I get to the pull start. So, I'm not sure if you can totally see it or not. Probably not, but way down right here, that is a bolt. And that is not a bolt with a screw head on it. Which means the screw head is in here somewhere on the other side. So what that means is I have to take the entire shroud off. What do I mean by taking the entire shroud off? I'll tell you. So, as you can see, there's a split right here, all along here in the whole plastic shroud. What that means is that this section here needs to come off in order to get to the bolts in there, and most likely the fan has to come off as well. Okay, so upon further inspection, it looks like we can take the engine bolts out right here, and we don't actually have to take the fan off. Now, it only looks like there's two there, so I may actually have to pop that fan off. Yes, I'm going to have to pop that fan off, so I'm going to do that now. Yeah, there you go. So you see right there, there are my other two engine bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and pop those out real quick, and then the engine should pop right out. I was just about to say, there's some spider webs in here, and out crawls a spider. So, in order to pop the engine out, the engine does not want to come out. It's kind of stuck in there. This carburetor linkage is in the way. So, the carburetor also has to come off. So, my fuel lines are broken. I will have to replace them at some point. But I did get this carburetor off. Linkage should come out. Now the engine should just slide right out. I may have to take the gas tank off. There was just a shroud here that I took off. Right here. And now the engine should slide right out. There we go. And it looks like the kill wires have to come out as well. you know what? I'm just fixing the pull start, and I do have access to it right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the engine over and rest it right here. So now I have access to my pull start. Now I'll show you that whenever this engine decides to stop moving. Okay, so I have my myself on this pull start now. It looks like there's a shroud here that needs to come off in order for me to get to the pull start. So 3 bolts and that shroud comes off. And there, off comes the shroud. And here's our pull start. As you can see, this has a SimPull system, as they call it. It has that spring-loaded second assist to help start the engine. So when you're starting these leaf blowers, I'm just going to say this now. When you're starting these leaf blowers, stink bug. You ever see those guys that go to start their weed whacker or their leaf blower and they just pretty much yank their whole arm and yank the leaf blower to the floor to kind of start it? Yeah. You can do that with some of the blowers because they're able for it to do, but not on this one. Why? Because when you yank that string really hard, what happens is your pull rope yanks like that, and this does not move. So if you yank it hard enough, the inertia keeps this put, and this keeps moving and moving and moving, and the spring eventually, bam, snaps, all gone. And then what do you have to do? You have to go out and buy a whole new assembly. And they are not cheap. So, start your unit on the ground if you can, and don't be yanking your unit in the air to start it, because this secondary system will break. So, I'm going to go ahead and try to get whatever remainder of rope it has out. Seems to just have a hair. I'm not sure where that rope leads to. Oh, here it is. Such an idiot. So I'm going to try to get this rope out. Alright, that rope is now out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind up some new pull rope. Here's my new pull rope. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to spool it out of here and then wind it up. I'll show you that. So what I did, as you saw here, is I stiffened up the pull rope. I heated it up a bunch, and what it does is it kind of melted all the plastics together so I could easily slide it through this hole. And now I'm going to measure out and see how much I need. Okay, a little bit more. Okay, let's try this. This should do nicely. Yes, this works very well. So, I'm going to cut it around about here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to unwind it again. And then I'm going to tie a knot here. Okay, now that I have my pull string stringed up, I tied it together and I wrapped it around. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the shroud and I'm going to thread it through. Okay, so I got the pull start on it. It's pulling okay, but it's kind of sticky, as you can see. It's not going back that great. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some lube spray and lube up the pull start then. Okay.
What are you looking for?
I need a handle. I don't have one. Yes, I have one. I just have to figure out which one I want to use. Alright, so here's the deal. When I got this blower, as you probably saw earlier, it didn't have anything. No pull rope, no pull handle, no nothing. I have the pull rope on here now, but no pull handle. Unfortunately, I don't have I believe it's a Husqvarna pull handle for this one. Unfortunately, I don't have that. But I have managed to come across an old Homelight pull handle that's yellow. If I get this blower back together, or when I get this blower back together, if I get this blower working, I'll probably go over this with some black paint just to match the rest of the blower, the cowlings and whatnot. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and put this on there just to make it function, because that's all I got. Okay, so what I did is, like before, I burned this rope here and made it hard so I can stick it through the handle because I was having a hard time sticking it through. It still seems to not want to go through. Maybe I'll nip the top off. Let's see if that helps. There we go. Now I'll cut off the excess and then I'll tie a knot. And there you go, we have our pull handle installed and it works okay. But as you can see, there's some slack in the rope here and I need to get that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop it through the recoil and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So I've decided to pull the cover back off here because it's just easier to get to the pull rope. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the pull rope and slide it right to one of these notches right here. I'm not sure if you could see, but there's a notch right here that my pick is currently in, right there. I'm going to get the pull rope into that notch. And then I'm going to twist the whole thing with the pull rope in that notch. It's hard to see, but you see the pull rope's in that notch? I'm going to twist it around, let's say 3 times. I actually may have it too tight, so I'm going to go ahead and loosen it 1, just to be safe. And then the cowling will snap back in, and I'm going to go ahead and screw that back down. And I'm giving it the full-on test here. I'm pulling it probably about 3 feet out. And it's all coming back in. It's retracting how it should. So we have no issues. So now that that pull start works real good again, I'm going to go ahead and put it back on the engine. And then I'm probably going to end up putting the whole blower back together. So I'll catch up with you later. I went over the fan with some sudsy stuff. There is a little bit of dust on the fan. Just because you can see the fan when the machine's all together in the little grooves. So I wanted to go ahead and clean the fan off a little bit. Okay, so a little bit of a story here. I got the fan on. It freely moves, but I'm not sure if you saw in the video or not. But when I tightened the fan previously, it would just clench onto the plastic. And I was wondering, well, why in the world is the fan like not going on right? So I look over to my table and I find this spacer. I was working on a home light blower and I thought, oh, I just forgot to put that piece of spacer away. Well, little did I know, The spacer was supposed to go on the inside of this blower. And what that spacer did is there's a bearing in there, kept that bearing from moving back when I tightened the bolt. And because that spacer's now in there, this bolt is really tight and the fan spins. And you can hear the pull start pulse working in there. That's a good sign. And between now and then, I cleaned off the surface of the blower housing here. And yeah, I'm gonna put it back together now, I guess. Okay, I got the blower all back together. I'm gonna see if the pull start works and if everything seems to click and joint okay. Yeah, look at that. Pull start works good. Trigger works well. Everything seems to work. Okay, so I'm gonna call a checkpoint here. It is getting a little late and you know, I don't wanna work when it's laid out and I can't see anything. So, I'll come back to you guys tomorrow. Okay, it's the next day here. Today, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna see if I can actually get it running now. Because yesterday I kind of just, you know, devoted most of my time to the actual pull start. So I'm gonna see what I can do to get this unit running. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little bit of 2-stroke gas and spray it down the spark plug hole. And then I'll give it full juice and try to start it and see if it runs and dies. If it runs and dies, we have a fuel issue. If it doesn't run and die, then we'll have another issue, such as like spark or compression, maybe even exhaust. But we'll have to see. So I'm gonna go grab a spark plug wrench. I'm gonna pop the plug out, and I'm gonna put some 2-stroke gas in and try it. This spark plug is really in here stiff. Usually stiff spark plugs can mean something like lack of lubrication, but we'll see. Nope. Definitely not a lack of lubrication with that sucker. That is a foulie. Well, we'll see what happens. The engine turns over smooth. So, I'm gonna stick a little 2-stroke gas in her and see if she pops off. Okay, I moved outside for this one because you never want to start your unit inside because of the poisonous gas. So, I'm going to go ahead and see if she starts and dies. choke off, trigger pulled. Let's give it a shot. First pull, wow. And it smoked pretty good, and it ran strong, and everything seems to work well. So that tells me that we have a fuel delivery issue. So a fuel delivery problem, you say, well, I wonder what our problem is. Let me just take this off so we get better access here. Okay. So, in the gas tank, we have our fuel line that picks up fuel from the gas tank into the carburetor. So, uh-oh. That is what you call a broken fuel line. And you know what other bad news we got? There is gas in here. Is it water? Is it gas? Is it explosive? Is it dinosaur bones? I don't know. Well, we're gonna find out. I'm gonna dump that out, and we're gonna figure out what the heck some stranger put in this gas tank. Okay, I got my little container here. I'm just gonna dump out that gas and see what comes out. Good news and bad news. The good news is it has a green color. And I'm not sure if you could see it. It is a green color, which means there is oil in this gas. That's good. The bad news is there's a fuel filter in there, and that fuel filter should be attached to a fuel line. So that's another problem we be having with this blower is the fuel filter has seemed to come off of the fuel line. I'll tell you a little bit about how that works when I replace the fuel lines. What else is in the fuel system that could make my machine not run? Well, what's the only thing besides the fuel lines between the gas tank and the engine? That would be the carburetor. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pop the carburetor off and take it apart. I'll examine it and see, what the deal is, because typically there's some parts in there that are very wearable and will need to be replaced. So I'm just gonna go through and rebuild the carburetor just as a safety precaution so that this machine doesn't run like when I put it back together. Okay, so to take the carburetor off, it's pretty simple. I'm not sure if you can see, but there is 2 big hex bolts that hold the whole thing on. So all I have to do is pop those 2 hex bolts out, and everything should come off. Slide those 2 bolts out. Out comes our air cleaner assembly. That will need to be cleaned. It's very dirty. And the carburetor seems to have come right off. Now let's get that linkage out. So it looks like for this linkage, you have to twist a little bit, and it comes right out. And then we have another fuel line here, which seems to be broken, and another one that's missing. So we'll have to assess that at the bench. Now this gasket here does not seem like it wants to come off. Yeah, this gasket's just peeling. So I may have to use another gasket. I'm gonna have to, yeah, that gasket just broke. So I'm gonna have to use another gasket, but for now we're gonna start with rebuilding this carburetor. Take a guess where we're going. To the bench! Welcome to the world's messiest bench. I'm not gonna let you see it because it's messy. Regardless, we have a carburetor rebuild, so I'm gonna get to it. And for this job, we will need so many tools that I'm not sure if I have enough. It's a lot of tools, isn't it? A whole Phillips screwdriver. My point I'm trying to make here is this job is so easy that just about anybody could do it if they know what they're talking about. All you need is a Phillips screwdriver. So let's get to it. There's 2 screws at the top you gotta take off. From here, this housing should come off with the 2 screws. The primer bulb should come off. I'm gonna set that aside, and then this should come off here. That leaves us exposed to our fuel pump. I'm going to go ahead and separate the gaskets there if they decide to come off. If not, then we're going to have to get some elbow grease out. Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a razor blade here and I'm just going to scrape under where this gasket's supposed to go, because sometimes that's the only way that you can get your gaskets off. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like that for now, and you'll see why in a second. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop my check valve out, like that, and I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. There's a little bit of fuel line that looks like has gotten left on there, so I'm going to go ahead and try to take that off. There you go, you just got to find the right tool for the job. Might as well take this fuel line off as well. There we go. Not going to be needing that. And then from here, there is a screen in here. Sometimes you can get it out with a Phillips screwdriver, but sometimes you have to take it into your own hands and just kind of yank it out with a pick. It depends on when it wants to come out. There it goes. You see, there's my screen right there. And there is a little bit of dirt in that screen. I'm not sure if you could see it or not, but you don't want that. And what can also happen is, I'm going to show you this now. I'm not sure if you could see any light through that screen, but yeah, there's a little bit going through. But what happens over time is if you run ethanol gas in your trimmers, what happens is these screens will eventually kind of dissolve and turn into like a paste. And then that paste will clog up your screen and restrict fuel flow. So that is a wearable part, and that needs to get replaced every now and again. Other side, this is our metering side. This is what controls how much fuel goes into your trimmer. This is the diaphragm that always gets stiff and always needs replacing, because this one, if it gets stiff, your unit will run lean, and you'll have to run the unit with the choke on most of the time for it to even run. So if you're having issues where your unit is only running on the choke, your problem is probably going to be this diaphragm under here. Here it is. It's somewhat supple and stiff, but you really want it to be super, super, super supple. And I'll show you that in a second. Yeah, you see these gaskets have just deteriorated. So I'm gonna have to scrape this gasket off as well. Okay, I got most of that gasket off, and again, I'm not gonna get it all off, and I'll tell you why in a second. And then from here, inside of your carburetor, you have this is a check valve. This is a little rubber piece under that brass fitting there. What that does is there's a pulse, an air pulse that goes through the carburetor and pushes your diaphragm down and lets fuel in. But sometimes you want to stop that fuel from coming in and going back into your fuel tank. So what that happens is that check valve just shuts then and stops fuel from coming back in to the carburetor. These are your Welch plugs. These, if you pull them out, they're basically access to small jets, like really tiny jets that sometimes get clogged. Often they're for idle, so if your machine's having trouble idling, you can pull those out and you can clean the jets under there. To pull those out, you typically want to have like a center punch and a hammer. Put this in a vise or just hold it really tightly on a desk. And then take a punch and just punch those out to the side. And they'll pop out then. If you have a small screwdriver and you make a hole through it, you can just pry those out. But I won't be doing that today because this carburetor seems to be clean enough where I won't be needing it. I'm going to go ahead and take this one screw out. That separates my metering lever, the pin and the needle and the spring. So all that just came out on the table there. And then from here, This carburetor is going to have a date with the ultrasonic cleaner. Now, the reason I didn't take most of these gaskets off, and even some of the gaskets on here, is because the ultrasonic cleaner typically loosens up those gaskets enough so that I can eventually just come later on and take them right off. So I'm going to put this piece here in the ultrasonic, this in the ultrasonic. Well, you know what? I'm not going to put this plastic piece because plastic typically degrades in the ultrasonic. So I'm going to pull out this choke assembly here, and I'm just going to pull it out, just pull out everything, and I'm just not going to even include it in the ultrasonic. So you have to be careful if you take out those assemblies. You have to be careful. This hole right here, there'll outcome a ball and a spring. That's so that when you hit your trimmer on half choke, it kind of clicks. That ball and spring is what causes that click. It's all in this carburetor. I'm not going to take these jets out because typically these usually have a seal problem once they come out. So that, in my experience, I'm not going to take them out. Yeah, everything's ready to go in the ultrasonic. I'm going to put this in the ultrasonic. I'm going to put this in and this. All 4 of these pieces here are going to go in the ultrasonic. Okay, right now the ultrasonic's not terribly warm. It's only about 17 degrees. It's kind of cold, actually. But I'm going to start like that. Yeah, it's pretty cold. I'm going to start it off like this, and by the end of the time, it'll probably warm up. So, I'm going to go ahead and put in the carburetor. I'll probably put it in fuel pump side up. And I'll go ahead and put the rest of my little doohickeys in here. And then I'm going to go ahead and put all these in the ultrasonic. Cover it up. Now, I'm going to turn the heat off because the ultrasonic typically cleans better when the heat is off. So I'm going to turn that off. And then I'm going to set the timer to 30 minutes. And I'm going to let it go for then. And I'll come back when it's done. Okay, we just got our parts done in the ultrasonic. Now, I get to take my parts out and see how they turned out. I'm going to go look back at it on the bench. Okay, so here's my result. Everything seemed to have gotten a little bit cleaner. My gasket material's still on there, but oh well, I can scrape that off then. I'm hoping it's going to be easier to scrape off. Okay, so we are going to be rebuilding this carburetor now. The kit I have for this is a Walbro K20-WAT, in case you're looking for the part number. It's a Walbro K20-WAT. Make sure to get the one made by Walbro if you have a Walbro carburetor, because anything else really shows a decline in quality. It'll work fantastic when you put it together, but maybe 3-6 months later, it's just gonna fail. It's worth the extra money just to get the OEM part. So first thing we're gonna rebuild is we're gonna put all of this section back together, the metering lever, needle and seat and all that. So it looks like we have our pin and our new lever. Go ahead and install the lever onto the pin like that, and then put your pin in the lever. Oops. Make sure to indent your pin off to the right, and then I'm going to put my spring down in my carburetor, and then I'm going to press everything in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and find that set screw. I'm going to go ahead and put that set screw back in there. Usually the OEM kits are pretty good about this, but I always like to make sure that my lever is adjusted properly. So what I do is I take my W tool and I run it right over the top of the metering lever. Now, it shouldn't be touching. This section of the W should not be touching, but it should just be running barely over top. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but it's not touching, but it's barely running over top. It's probably blurry, but you're going to have to take my word for it. And then from here, I'm going to have to go ahead and find a new gasket and diaphragm. Now this is the part that always goes bad right here. This is the part that you always want to make sure that you get the OEM part. So I'm going to go ahead and put my gasket back on. And then I'm going to put my diaphragm on. Now you have to know that the gasket goes on first and then the diaphragm. And then I'm going to take this cover here. It doesn't matter. There's a little port right here. It doesn't really matter which way you put it on. Typically from the factory they come put to the left, so that's just how I put it on. Doesn't matter. It's cover square. And then tighten these down reasonably. You don't want to go lug nut tight with these because they will break. But go tight enough so you can seal off that gasket. There we go. Everything's on there nice and tight. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on to the other side. So now I'm going to go ahead and put my screen on. So what I like to do is I like to rest the screen right over top. And then what I'll do is I'll take a 1964 drill bit and then I'll just push the screen in like this, and the screen will seat in there nicely. And then I will take a 7/32 drill bit and then push it in a second time, because there is a small little groove in there that it really should be getting into. And once you've done that, then you can go ahead and put your drill bits away. Your screen is seated. One thing you want to be careful of is when you put the screen on, you want to make sure it fully covers the bottom, because sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then your screen is lacking doing what it's doing. It's basically useless. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and put my diaphragm back on. So there's my old diaphragm, and I'm going to go ahead and find which one matches the old one. I believe it is this one here. Yes, and then my old gasket, it has kind of fallen apart by now, but I believe this is the gasket I want to go on. Like that. So I'm going to go ahead and put the diaphragm. Now the diaphragm goes on first on this model, and then the gasket goes on after the diaphragm. And then I can go ahead and put this cover back on. Make sure to open the throttle a little bit. There you go. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my check valve back in. All you have to do with that is put it in your brass hole here and then give it a really big push. Okay, our check valve has seated. You want to make sure that it is all the way seated. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my primer bulb back on. I'm going to use whoops. I am going to use my old primer bulb because these Walbro primer bulbs, these small ones, I don't have any. So I'm going to use the old primer bulb. And I'm going to go ahead and put my primer cover back on. I'm going to put the screws back in. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my choke assembly back in. So I'm going to go ahead and find that spring and that ball and put them back in this little hole at the top. Like that. And then I'm going to put my lever back in here. Like that. And then I'm going to find where it clicks. It seems to click here, here, and here. So it looks like that's where it has to go. So I'm going to put it in the open choke position. And then I'm going to take my little butterfly and I'm going to go ahead and slide that back in. That's the wrong way. Whoops. There you go. The butterfly's back in. You'll hear it click. And then go ahead and open and shut your assembly just to make sure it works right. And mine seems to be working just right. And my carburetor has successfully been rebuilt. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of those fuel lines now. Okay, we're back at the blower here, and it looks like we have a fuel line right here, so I'm just going to go ahead and yank that out. And you know what? There is a grommet inside of there. I'm going to use my forceps to get it out. I'm sorry, it's not a grommet. It's just one of those little things that they put on the end of the return line. There we go. This is what I'm talking about here, the little barbed fitting they put on the end of the return line. Don't know why they do it, but they do. My fuel line just broke. Whichever comes out first, right? There we go. We got that out. Now I'm just going to go over it with a little bit of sudsy stuff because it is dirty. Okay, that's a little bit better. Now I'm going to go ahead and find my new fuel lines. So it looks like there is two sizes of fuel lines here. There is a small one and a big one. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll get back to you. Okay, I managed to find a strip of fuel lines. So this line right here, this is my yellow line, this is my smaller line. Not sure on the sizes. This one's my bigger line here. As you can see, it's a little bit bigger. This one I know is a 3/32 by 3/16. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip the end of this fuel line just at an angle like that so I can feed it into the gas tank. It makes it easier to feed into the gas tank when you cut it at an angle like that. And once I feed it through the gas tank, I'm going to give me some slack, enough so I can get it back out of the fill cap so I can put my fuel filter on. Typically, the fuel filter goes on the narrower line or the smaller line. I'm not sure why. The only reason I can think of is because it has less weight and it can move around more easily. But that's probably how it was from the factory, so that's probably how I'm going to put it on. Okay, we got our fuel line out of the gas tank fill here. We're going to go ahead and cut that slant that we already cut off. And then I'm going to go ahead and test the fuel filter and then put it back on there. This fuel filter is still in this pile of gas. I'm going to go ahead and take it out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray some carb spray through it. And then I'm going to spray some air through it just to see if the fuel filter is still good. So now what I'm going to do is I have my air gun here and my fuel filter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spray in the air gun into the fuel filter. Now because I have some carb spray in here, in theory, some bubbles should come out of the fuel filter, or some indication that air is flowing through the fuel filter. Now if this doesn't happen, then I need to replace the fuel filter because it is clogged. So let's see what happens. Okay, so you can clearly see that there was bubbles coming out of the fuel filter. that indicates that this fuel filter is in good shape. Now I have to do the very almost impossible job of getting this fuel filter onto the skinny fuel line. So you'll watch me wrestle for probably about 5 minutes trying to get this on. So we'll see how I end up. So I have managed to get that fuel line on. It is not coming off. It is snug on there. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there is no easy way to get this on there. You're just going to have to struggle. Now, you saw me use pliers there. Be very careful because pliers will scrape your fuel lines and make pinholes in it. If you have a pinhole in your fuel line, that will lead to further problems. So what I did is I used the flat part of my pliers on the very end of my pliers, the flat part, and I kind of put very minimal force on it, pushed down and twisted. That seemed to get it on there pretty well, and that's what worked for me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and push that fuel filter right back in the tank, and then I'm going to level it out so that when I'm actually using the unit like this, the fuel is at the bottom of the tank. So I'm going to go ahead and push that fuel filter way down there with my forceps. Okay, so as you can see, that fuel line is now rested right at the bottom of the tank. That's exactly where, maybe I'll pull it up just a hair. Just like that. But other than that, that fuel line is rested right at the bottom of the tank there, and I should have no issue sucking up fuel when the tank is very low. So now I'm going to move on to the return line. Okay, so for the return line, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut a little sliver in my line so I can get it in my tank. I'm going to go ahead and feed the line through my tank. Cut off the excess, and then that little barbed fitting that they like to put on there, wherever it went, here it is. This little barbed fitting, this is for the return line. I'm going to go ahead and put it back in there, just so that if someone decides to pull on the fuel line sometime in the future, it has a lesser chance of coming out. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there, and I'm going to pull this fuel line back out as much as I can. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and slap my carburetor back on there with a different gasket. And then I'm going to cut the fuel lines based on where the carburetor lays. So then I'm going to go ahead and measure out where my fuel lines are going to be. And then I'm going to cut it just a hair longer so that I actually have room. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and install my fuel line, if it'll even go on. I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. Measure it out, and then a little bit longer. Go ahead and put that fuel line right on. There we go. We're done. Okay, so I pretty much put the entire unit back together here. I put the gas cap back on too. I was playing with this a little bit because this was a little wobbly. But, you know, it is what it is. It's just a cover. It's nothing else. It's how it's going to be. And then the choke wasn't closing all the way. And then I realized, well, you know what? I put that gasket on wrong. So I swapped the gasket around and put it on where it's supposed to be. And the choke works okay now. Opens and shuts and it clicks. That little ball and spring are working okay because it clicks. So what do we have left to do to this thing other than clean it, put the pipe on, and put some gas and see if it runs? Okay, I got myself some two-stroke gas here. I'm gonna go ahead and put that in and see if she starts. I may have to adjust the carb, but we'll see. Prime that carburetor up. Make sure fuel gets in there. Oh, there we go. Yep. Prime it up real good. Oh, I got the wrong adjusting tool. There we go. That's the right one. Let me make sure there's an air filter in here. There is. Yeah, okay. Pop that back in there. Let's see if it starts. Choke on, throttle down. Alright, we gotta adjust the carburetor. Good news is it runs, it starts, it runs great. So, I'm going to call it a win. So, it works, it runs. I'm going to go put the tube on it now and test it. Alright, I just got done testing it and it works pretty good. I don't have any complaints. The only complaint I have is that turbo tip that came with it right here does not seem to be working that great. And just in time too, because it has started to rain. So this blower is going to be up for sale pretty soon. And thank you guys very much for watching. I'm sure I'll have another leaf blower video out soon. The season's not over. So I'll see you guys on the next video.